friends and artists, welcome back to Painted Kids. My name is Miss Jessica, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I know that we usually have our educational videos and our how-to drawings, but today we're going to just kind of go off the beaten path a little bit. So fun fact about me is I love animated films. I always have. So ever since I was little, I've always just been fascinated by animation. It doesn't matter if it's 2D, 3D, or stop motion animation, I have always found it super intriguing. So we decided to kind of play on that a little bit. So anytime there's an animation that I really like and just resonates with me, I love doing the research on who made it, why did they make it, all the background information. Like anytime you get a DVD or anytime that you buy the film after it's come out, and they have all the behind the scenes and the features and all the bonus things, like I am in love with that stuff. So if anytime I end up going and seeing this film with someone else, or if my sister comes over or any of my friends and I'm like, hey, you have to see this animated film, they'll usually come over, and while we're watching the film I always look at them and I'm like, did you know? And I tell them all the wonderful things that I have learned about the film, and all of my sisters will agree that anytime you sit down with me and watch a film, there will be at least a handful of did you knows. So I decided to bring my did you knows to the channel and just kind of have fun with you guys. And while I'm telling you all of my wonderful did you knows, I thought that I would actually draw. Now, because it is the Halloween season, I thought that our first video would be a very well-known one. The first film we're going to talk about is The Nightmare Before Christmas. I even have my little Zero shirt on today, so that way we can talk about it. And while I talk about it, I'm just going to go ahead and do a my style challenge drawing of a Nightmare Before Christmas character. Okay, so I'm going to get my pen and we're just going to get started. All right. So, did you know that the beginning of Nightmare Before Christmas, not the beginning of like the film, but in the beginning of the brain in which it exists, it began on August 25th, 1958. Tim Burton was born in Burbank, California. His parents were Bill and Jean Ray. I believe she went by Ray more so than anything else. But Jean was a stay-at-home mom, and she did have a couple like odds and ends kind of jobs just as the kids were growing up, and then eventually opened up like a cat store, like where you could buy like cat sweaters, like cat mugs, anything cat themed, you could buy it in her store. Now Burton says that she really didn't do that until later on in his life, after he had moved out of the house. And a lot of people would comment to him and say like, oh, well, I guess you get your quirkiness from your mother. And he was like, I really don't find it all that quirky. I actually kind of find it a little bit terrifying. I guess Burton wasn't the biggest fan of cats. I'm not exactly sure. But his dad was a minor league baseball player, but sustained an injury that forced him to leave the game. And unfortunately, he was never able to return to it. He ended up working at a park and rec department in Burbank to support his family. So when Burton was growing up, he often described himself as kind of an oddball, kind of an outcast. He himself just always felt kind of isolated, a little bit different from the kids in the neighborhood. He was in love with monster movies, loved monster movies like Godzilla and Dracula and Frankenstein, and he kind of, in a way, identified with the monsters just because he never quite fit in. So because he liked monster movies and not what normal kids liked, a lot of people in his neighborhood were like, oh, you're weird, you're different, and he just kind of didn't quite understand that. He's like, well, I don't understand why you feel the need, to put me in this category. But okay, sure, I guess I'm just odd. And so he didn't really have too many friends, but he did have a younger brother, Daniel, and his brother actually became an artist as well. But so he loved films, and one of his favorite horror monster actors was Vincent Price, and he loved his work, absolutely was just infatuated with that. So a lot of times as a kid growing up, Burton would go down the street. There was a cemetery, and he would go and he would hang out in the cemetery, and a lot of people found that kind of odd. They're like, why is this kid going down to the cemetery? But he later talked about how it was just nice because he could go and it was quiet and nobody talks to you in a cemetery. It's just like, it was just a nice, quiet place to think. And a lot of times, it's not like, he didn't get along with his parents, but he didn't quite really connect with them. And so he found a lot of just escape in the horror films that he would watch and his drawings and everything. One of his biggest dreams as a kid was actually to become an actor inside the Godzilla costume in those older Godzilla movies. I mean, he doesn't really do that now, but I guess he got pretty close, huh? A lot of times growing up, like him and his brother Daniel, remember Daniel? They would sit in front of the TV and watch movies and just have big pads of paper and just draw. He was always just had a very creative mind. One year for Halloween, he actually dressed up as Jack Skellington. And his mom wasn't artsy, but she was crafty. Now, a lot of you guys might understand this aspect of your creativity, but me personally, I'm more of an artsy person and not a crafty person. So a lot of times those like scrapbooking and craft stuff that you see on Pinterest, definitely can't do that. I'm more of an artist. So his mom was a crafty artist, and so she actually helped him make that costume and would just make little craft knick-knacky things and put them around the house and everything. So in those early years, he was like, Jack Skellington was kind of always with him. Now the actual plot and theme of Nightmare Before Christmas, he got inspired by the department stores putting out their decorations. Now, you guys have probably already noticed that Halloween is coming to an end here soon, and the Christmas decorations are already up. So because he lived in Burbank, he said that when you live in California, there's not many seasons, and so you can really tell what time of year it is more so by the decorations that are going up in the department store rather than watching leaves change or snowfall. So he kind of drew inspiration from the department stores changing around their decorations. So as Burton continued to grow and get older, he still kept all of his creativeness, but there were times that he kind of tried to delve into sports a little bit just to try to connect with his dad on a deeper level. Not that him and his parents were completely disconnected, but he just always felt kind of like the odd man out because of his interests and the things that he was really into. Monsters and stuff, and his darker styles and everything like that. And so when he was in high school, he actually joined the swim team and the polo team, water polo team. And he said that he wasn't like amazing at sports, but he wasn't terrible either. So he was just kind of like right there in the center. He just always felt just like on a different like wavelength than his parents. Not necessarily that he hated them or they hated him or that no one got along ever. It was just different. Like it was just, and I think every kid feels that way, especially growing up and trying to figure out where you fit in and all that stuff. And he just never really felt like he fit in anywhere. Tim mostly spent his time with his younger brother and their dog Pepe, but obviously, dogs don't live forever, and his dog's death was kind of the first experience that he had with losing something that you really love and care about. So as Tim entered high school, he tried to kind of find where he fit in, and he just never. I mean, people liked him, and he wasn't considered like an outcast or anything like that, but he definitely didn't feel like he belonged anywhere. He found his art really helped him, get through all those different things, and he came to really confide in one of his art teachers. Her name was Miss Adams, and she really encouraged him to just be himself and not really worry about what other people thought. In the past, he'd had other teachers tell him like, oh, you need to draw this way, or you need to do things like this, and he always just felt just alone in his way of thinking. And Mrs. Adams was just so encouraging and really wanted to make sure that you know, that creativity that she saw in him just grew instead of died out. Because, you know, that's the crazy thing about a teacher. A teacher has the power to really uplift or to scuff out the inner creativity that I think is in all of us. So, and Miss Adams just really encouraged him, and a lot of people asked her, like, you know, what was he like as a student? And she's like, you know, he was a good student. He was just a bit of a wallflower, and a lot of people pictured him as like this gothic kind of kid, but he really wasn't. He was just kind of a normal looking kid, and he wasn't like dark and gloomy like his characters and stuff. But Miss Adams was just always there for him and always encouraging him, and it was actually a project in her class where he experienced his first ever stop motion assignment, and he was able to do it with a couple other kids in his class and really get a feeling for what stop motion was all about. And she always told him, she said, what you're doing is great and keep it up and don't ever stop. And he never did. So that must feel pretty good as a teacher to, you know, look at when your students succeed, and to succeed at the caliber of Tim Burton. It must have made her feel really good. And teachers, like, seriously, you could be teaching the next Tim Burton. You don't even know. It's crazy. Even in his youth, if you look in his sketches, and he's kept all of his sketches, and at one point, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City actually featured a collection of all of his works, including things in his sketchbook. And in his earlier years of high school and as a kid, he had pictures of Jack Skellington. And the concept for this character came just slowly over time, and then the story of the character. So the story came after the sketch, and you kind of realize that that's kind of how he works as a creator. He'll come up with a sketch, and then after the sketch is like formulated, then he works on creating a story around the character. So he always had this character and wasn't sure what to do with it, and he knew what had, you know, inspired it, which was the Halloween decorations and the Christmas decorations, but he wasn't sure how to really put it together until he created a poem. So before Nightmare Before Christmas became what it is, it was a poem. And you'll notice in the beginning of the movie, there's actually a portion of that poem being read, but they cut it down so much just for time's sake, and, you know, you have to be very careful about what you decide to actually put in a movie in the end, because there is such a limited amount of time. But you get to hear a little bit of it. So another big inspiration in Tim's life was the stop motion Christmas movies that came out every year around Christmas time, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And he was just really intrigued by the way that those stop motion characters moved, and just the whole process of it. And he originally intended for Nightmare Before Christmas to become one of those things that was released once a year. But it never actually took off that way. A lot of networks were like, this is too scary. We can't air this on TV. So it actually took Tim Burton 20 years before it would be picked up, and the film was debuted October 29th, 1993. So people wondered exactly how long, you know, Nightmare Before Christmas had really been, you know, going around in Tim Burton's head. And it's said that the poem predated the short Vincent. So I'm pretty sure that I'll link the Vincent short in the description below, so you guys can actually see it. And that was the first stop motion film that Tim Burton did. So, and because we're talking mostly about Nightmare Before Christmas, I won't go through like his entire filmography. But if you guys want to see something like that, let me know in the description below. So even though the movie itself is called Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, Tim Burton actually didn't direct it. He was in the middle of Batman Returns. So for those of you, again, I'm not going to go over his whole filmography, but, you know, in the past he directed movies like Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands and the Batman movies. So he was in the middle of Batman Returns when he got the opportunity to do Nightmare Before Christmas, and he'd been waiting 20 years for this to happen. So he was like, I am doing it. So instead of him becoming the director, it was Henry Selick that actually directed the film, but they worked closely together. But he did still receive credit because even though he wasn't there constantly directing, he was still producing creating the story, and he created the characters and the character design and everything. So it's still technically his, even though he wasn't on set directing. So you might have noticed a trend in a lot of Tim Burton films. He usually brings in a recurring cast of people, and one of those people was Danny Elfman. And a lot of you might be wondering who's Danny Elfman. He's actually the one that wrote the music, and he also sang for the character Jack Skellington. And Tim worked really well with Danny, and he really felt that Danny would be able to come in and write the music and really portray what was in Burton's head. And the script wasn't even done yet, so Elfman decided to start writing the music before it was even done. So Burton would come over to his house, they'd sit down, and he'd just be like, okay, well, walk me through everything that's going on in your head. So Burton would go over everything that he was thinking. He's like, well, I think we're going to do this and this. And again, the script isn't even written yet. This is just him like, okay, this is the overall feel that we're going to have for Jack and how he's going to go about this. And Elfman just wrote the music. So the music was done before the script was even completed. That's crazy. Like, to have that skill and have that talent, and to also be the one to sing for the character in the end is amazing. And because of all the work that Elfman put into it, he actually gets a cameo appearance. If you look at the band, when Jack's all bummed out and stuff, and he's walking by and he tips them, and the bass is a recreation of Elfman's head inside of it. And so next time you watch that, and see if you can spot it. Designing the characters and everything, like I said, Burton kind of had these characters already figured out and how he wanted to create them. So he gets the music going, and he's describing these characters, and he's sketching them out and trying to figure it out. And Jack's character, even though he is a skeleton, Burton relied heavily on a spider kind of influence, and you'll notice that in his long limbs and everything, and when he moves and dances around. And so Burton tried very hard throughout the entire process to give Jack a lot of spider-like movement and qualities and everything like that. So the complexity of a stop motion animation is, you're taking all these different pictures, and the most challenging part about doing a stop motion animation is that if something is wrong, you have to go back and you have to start completely over, because of the process of taking pictures, and everything has to be perfect. And sometimes it would just happen and there's nothing you could really do about it. But other things that the team designed in order so something like that wouldn't happen, they actually designed a red light to go off anytime one of their lights didn't come on, because there was just so much going on. So for this entire film, there was only 13 animators that were actually on the team, which isn't a lot. In my mind, I'm thinking 13 isn't a lot, but maybe 13 is pretty average for stop motion animation, just because it's hard. The more bodies that you have, the harder it is to get things done. And the way that they had the stage set up, so when they create the design, so they start with Tim Burton's character design, okay? Then they start writing out the script. Then once the script is written, then they go to the storyboard. And the storyboard is just all these different drawings that put everything into sequence, so that way the animators kind of know what direction that their characters are going to be going, and they'll know how to set up the scenes. Now, stop motion, unlike 2D animation or 3D animation, they set it up like an actual movie set, where they have their props, they have their scenes, they have costumes, they have all these different things, and they have all these lights. So even though it is technically an animated film, it's still treated like a full feature film on top of it being animated. So there's a lot more steps involved. So once they get everything kind of figured out in their heads about, okay, so this is how we want, Halloween Town to look, this is how we want Christmas Town to look, this is how we want the Santa Claus and the Boogeyman to look. So after they get all these looks down, that's when the team starts creating. They get miniature models made, and even of the sets, they get miniature models made. And the set designers have to just figure out, because the sets are so big, they have to figure out how they're going to break these sets down, so that way they can move things around, get animators in to change puppet positions. It is a whole problem. It's like an entire team of engineers need to come in and figure out this stuff. and design tunnels that, you know, the animators can get under, so that way they can pop up and reposition without affecting the rest of the scene, because if one thing goes wrong, they have to start completely over. So, and to put this kind of in perspective, 1 minute of the film took 1 week to complete. That's a long time, and everyone worked very hard to make sure nothing was going to be compromised during the shoot. So in total, there was about 100 people that actually worked on the film altogether. So you had all these people coming together. And again, that still doesn't sound like a lot. Like, I feel like nowadays a lot more people working on a project, but they only had 100 people working. Only 13 of those people were the animators, and everyone else was in charge of lights, set design, costume design, puppetry. So there was over 230 sets scanning across 19 different sound stages. So in order to fit the entire world that is contained in Nightmare Before Christmas, 230 sets. That's insane. That is a huge amount of people working and pulling things out and doing all these different things in order to create the world that, you know, Jack lives in with his characters. Stop motion animation, there's a whole other slew of problems, you know, making sure the lighting's correct, making sure that, you know, okay, well, we're done for the day, and then coming back and making sure that your puppets haven't moved, or you know, humidity hasn't changed so much that the fabric is shifting a different way so you can see it. You know, there's simple things like that. I mean, they even have to figure out how to make something so small feel so real, so that way you're immersed in it and you don't feel like, you know, because that's the whole point of animation, is to make it feel real, so that way you as the audience is enthralled. And so, like, coming up with little solutions to problems, like Santa Claus's naughty and nice list, like having to figure out, okay, well, how can we make something, because it's not just paper, because paper, you know, the way that it has to move, it has to look like real paper. They can't do it with just that, because they have to be able to move it without it wrinkling and looking bad. So the naughty and nice list is actually pieces, really thin pieces of paper, and then in between that is foil. So on set there were 8 camera crews, just trying to figure out how to get these scenes right, and having to make sure that everything got shot correctly and the different points and everything, because when you're doing a stop motion film, you know, you want to get a bunch of different angles without having to redo it. So 8 camera crews. So there was only 3 or 4 people in their sculpture department, and that is a big responsibility. So the sculpture department is actually going to be in charge of the puppets. Now, there were about 60 characters total within the entire story of Nightmare Before Christmas, and each of these characters had multiple puppets, because as you are, you know, moving the puppets around and you're doing different things with them, they tend to wear out, so they have to have multiples. And a lot of times they'll have replacement hands as well, just because of how quickly those kind of things wear out. So in total there was about 200 puppets used throughout this film. So at the end of the day, the sets were about 24 feet long, and hence why they had to have all the different breakaway parts of the set. Now, remember when I said that when you do stop motion, it's like an actual movie set, and even though it is small scale, they still had 30 lights, all for that dramatic lighting and for that really nice, awesome effect. So the way that they approached the style of the Nightmare Before Christmas set was they really wanted it to feel like an ink drawing had kind of popped off the page, and so that's why there are so many streaky lines and this feeling of just texture on everything. And so they actually laid plaster over the set and then just put the little marks all through it. So this all went into the set design. Now, as far as the character design goes, originally Jack was actually supposed to be in an all black suit. It was actually Selleck that decided that it was better for Jack to have the white stripes, so that way he would pop up against the background of the set itself. And when designing Jack, they had to kind of go through and they had to figure out all of the facial expressions that he was going to make throughout the film. And they do the same thing with all the other puppets as well, including like Sally and all the other monsters that live in Halloween Town. And Jack, he had about 400 different heads, so they would swap out his head for every single facial expression as they would do it. One of the most difficult things that they encountered doing Nightmare Before Christmas was actually the scene where you see Jack's reflection in the door handle that led to Christmas Town. Now, if you might recall, when I was talking about Mr. Burton when he was a child, one of the things he loved was monster movies, and in those monster movies, one of his favorite actors was Vincent Price, and Vincent Price was actually going to be a voice in Nightmare Before Christmas. He was going to be Santa Claus, but sadly Vincent Price's wife passed away, and so when it came time to record for the part, he just sounded too sad to play it, so they decided to replace him with someone else. Even though Burton was really set on doing, you know, everything complete stop motion animation and everything like that, there was a couple places in the film that they actually used computer technology to make the effect. So like with Zero and the ghosts that are carrying like their Halloween Christmas presents and stuff, those were added in later. And fun fact about Zero, his nose is actually a glowing jack-o'-lantern instead of the red nose of Rudolph. And that was actually intentional as well with keeping his nose orange, because they wanted Halloween Town to be a complete contrast from Christmas Town in the real world. So they made sure to just, for the world, to use blacks and grays and oranges. Obviously not with the characters' costumes. There's a lot of different colors, especially like in Sally's dress. But in the world itself, they really tried to stick to those colors to really show that Halloween feel. So originally Disney had rejected Tim Burton's idea for something in his style and genre because they felt like it would be too spooky. But after the successes of, you know, Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands and in his films that he was directing, they decided to give it a shot. So when they brought Burton on to do Nightmare Before Christmas, Disney insisted that Jack have eyes in his eye sockets, even though he was a skeleton, and because they felt like it would be too scary for kids. But Burton and Selleck would not budge. They were like, no, we are not adding friendly eyes to our character because this is not going to, it's not going to look right. So because of this, because they refused to put the eyes in, Disney didn't, so they were already invested in it, but they didn't want to put necessarily the Disney name on it. So instead they made it through their Touchstone Picture branch because they felt that it was too dark for the Disney name if Jack didn't have these eyes in his eye sockets. And thank goodness they stuck to that, because I think honestly Jack would have looked a lot creepier if he would have had eyes. Even though Disney was trying to distance themselves from the film in the sense of like their name, because they felt like the gloominess of it didn't quite fit the brand of Disney, Burton really still wanted to put hidden Mickeys in the film. And they were a little reluctant, but they let him do it. And it's in the scene where the kids are opening up their Christmas presents, and they have this doll that is like a Tim Burton version of Mickey Mouse, and then the kids are in I believe it's Minnie on the girls' pajamas, and it's a Donald Duck on the boys' pajamas. So he still was able to put like little Disney Easter eggs in there. So Burton had originally planned to make an appearance like Elfman in the film, but once Burton had presented the idea, it was deemed too gruesome, I guess, too dark for kids, because his cameo was actually going to be at the end when the vampires are ice skating and they're playing hockey. He was going to have his head be the puck, but they decided it was a little too gritty, so they replaced it with a pumpkin instead. Since the success of Nightmare Before Christmas, Burton has been approached multiple times for a sequel. And if they did do a sequel, they were like, oh, we want to do it in CGI. But Burton has refused multiple times to do a sequel because he feels like, because he wants to keep the integrity of the original. I think the thing that we can learn from Tim Burton and his experiences with Nightmare Before Christmas is honestly to never give up on, on your dreams. He stood firm on what he wanted to be and who he was as a creator. And he was never looking to become rich or famous. He just was looking to be able to create what he wanted to create. So I guess at the end of the day, if all of us can just be a little bit more like Tim Burton and figure out who we are and be unapologetic about it. That wraps up Did You Know? And I hope that you learned a lot of things. So next time when you watch the movie, you can say, hey guys, did you know? I hope you guys liked this video. I'm hoping to do many more of these and just really share my passion for animated films, and then also share fun facts about the creators. So thanks so much for watching, you guys. Please hit that subscribe button and give us a like. And in the comments below, if there are any facts that I missed, feel free to put them down so that our viewers can learn more about Tim Burton or Nightmare Before Christmas. If you guys want me to do a whole filmography of Tim Burton and everything that he's worked on, or if you guys have a favorite animated film that you want me to check out and then feature in another video, just let me know in the comments below. And also in the description, I will have all my source materials, so if you guys want to check it out yourself. I watched a lot of fun interviews and documentaries with Tim Burton, and then also about The Nightmare Before Christmas. So if you guys want to check it out, I will have that all in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, you guys, and I'll see you next time.